When you think about Peter, he's sort of like the Babe Ruth and Ted Williams of baseball because of his longevity, his high standards, his sustained excellence.
He was a giant in his field, a Renaissance man. He was more than I expected, more than I ever could have anticipated. He was a good man.
You've probably heard of the 4 C's of diamonds. Well, there are the 4 C's of Peter Drucker. And these are the values and guiding principles that he considered important, among others. One was competency, you have to have that. The other was character, compassion, and community. Those are at the DNA of effective organizations and effective leaders. Peter Drucker was born in Vienna, Austria in 1909. He witnessed World War I and the destruction that occurred and the fear that people lived in on a day-to-day basis.
We are influenced by our upbringing in our youth, and his youth was filled with political and economic turmoil. The Nazis came into power. He read Hitler's book, Mein Kampf. He took it seriously.
Liegt die Zukunft des deutschen Volkes.
By 1934, I believe, he left to go to England. He was working in investment banking, and he was working as a foreign correspondent. It was that background with which he came to the United States. And when he began to write, he began to look at everything from the outside in, from society in, wanting to build a strong society. This notion of a functioning society of organizations became very important to him.
What are the new forces in the market, the new changes, and incidentally, can we identify some major market areas?
Peter Drucker came to the Claremont Graduate University in 1971. He created a revolutionary executive education program.
I think he wanted to create several generations of effective managers and teachers of other effective managers. And I think he viewed that as the most promising mechanism for social change and good that could be.
He was a born teacher. You asked a question, you got a long explanation at home too. You know, I said, I don't want all this teaching. I just want an answer. No.
The peculiar shape of the grand piano is based on the mathematics, the geometry of the 18th century.
You would get a question and he would talk about it for probably close to an hour. And he would bring in aspects, and at times you would think he's completely lost his train of thought.
There's a wonderful story, World War II, of the man who was going to be the next chief of staff of the U.S. Army.
He's off talking about, St. Augustine and the monks, and then he would always bring it back and just nail it right at the end.
He'd give you an example from the Army, and he'd give you an example from the Jesuits, and he'd give you an example some political time way back in history.
And there's a very old Roman law doctrine that says, which from the beginning.
But if you hung on for 3 hours, woo, you come out with jewels that you don't forget.
The greatest weakness of executives is that they believe that they're being paid for being bright. They're being paid for being right.
No, I think almost all of his lectures had as a primary takeaway a moral obligation. The moral obligation of management to empower and contribute.
I think that is a part of the genius of Drucker, that he gets you thinking about issues. He throws out things, like management is a liberal art, the practice of management, which really did codify the practice of management. And he just threw that out. Well, it turns out that there's a whole lot behind that. It's true. It starts you thinking.
One of the, I think, important insights of Peter's was his recognition that management is a liberal art, that it's not simply learning how to do productivity or how to do marketing, but the really effective leader needs to understand psychology, needs to understand religion, needs to understand science, the whole series of what make up the liberal arts that inform the decision.
His view of the world, is what makes him so special. He always said, I'm a journalist, I'm not a management scholar. And I took that initially as kind of, tongue-in-cheek, but he really had a very vast, broad view of the world.
And I asked him what the most important thing that has happened in China the last 3 to 5 years. And he thought about 5 seconds and then said that we now consider owning an automobile a necessity and not a luxury. That is what globalization means. It is not an economic event, it's a psychological phenomenon.
He was prolific. We counted 39 legitimate entries. He actually wrote 2 novels during that process. They were not successful. Let me put it this way, he was a great writer, but he was not a great novelist.
He was a very ethical person, and the social well-being of the company and so on, the community so on, was way above this financial standing. He was much more interested. He was outraged by the great difference between the income of an executive and the worker.
I think he is one of the best observers I've ever met in my life, and a brilliant questioner. One time I was dealing with an individual in business who was not a particularly honorable person and who appeared to have tremendous productive capability. And I was mentioning this, and I could see from his questions, I think he was quietly thinking, are you an idiot? Like, if the guy has character flaws, that's it. That's all you need to know.
Drucker said in his 1946 book, which was The Concept of the Corporation that came out of his GM work, that the most durable organizations develop their people both intellectually and morally. And that's focusing on strengths. That way, organizations really fly, focused on strengths. It's a big deal in Drucker.
Very deep for Peter because it comes out of his past. He grew up in Austria. He saw the Nazi horrors. He saw what the Nazi philosophies did to people. And he had a deep respect for individuals, helping individuals to grow. That was all very, very genuine. If you look at the classic economic view of production or economic activity, right? You got machines, you've got labor, you've got land, all that. Well, people are the only infinitely expandable resource. So not only is it the right thing to do in terms of helping people grow for its own sake, but it turns out that it's a tremendous competitive advantage if you can really unleash the power of people.
What he was really trying to do is to develop management so that society's organizations could thrive, so that we would not succumb to the what he called the magicians, who could magically solve problems, the Hitlers and the totalitarian leaders. Freedom.
Peter Drucker has devoted his life to strengthening civil society. His determination has made him one of the greatest management experts of our time.
he understood that organizations were imperfect at best and often largely misguided. And at the same time, he had this sense of if you could tap into the mission or create a mission or a purpose, a sense of focus, and then get individuals who themselves had tremendous limitations but have one area of genius and empower that area of genius and enable those individuals to work constructively together toward that unified purpose, that great things could be accomplished. And that, to me, that's what this school is about.
He talked a lot about guiding principles and values of business. The faculty are constantly connecting what Peter believed was important to the topics that are on the desk of today's executive.
Our job is to enable our students to learn, enable them to make knowledge effective in their own work and in their own organization.